Welcome everyone to this BroadstairsLit socially distanced interview, the fourth in our series of interviews, and I'm here in glorious sunshine with the lovely Lara Maiklem.
Hello.
Hello, to talk all about her fantastic book Mudlarking. Well, Sunday Times bestseller, number 2 on that list.
Yep.
Radio 4 Book of the Week, the Observer Book of the Year, and recently you've just won the Independent Bookshop Award. So how does it feel? First book.
I know. It's been a whirlwind year. I never expected any of this to happen. You know, the hardback came out in August last year. I think you were at the launch, weren't you?
I was.
And it's just gone stratospheric. It's been incredible year.
And the paper book's just out.
Yep, paperback came out just a couple of weeks before lockdown, but that hasn't slowed it down any, I don't think.
And deservedly lots of glorious reviews, I have to say. The Sunday Telegraph, one of my favourites because there's a link to Broadstairs, our most famous holidaymaker, Charles Dickens. In the Sunday Telegraph, the review of your book said that your description of the London fog was worthy of Dickens, and it really doesn't get any better than that when you get a review. But my favourite is still one of the reviews describes your work as saying that these odd corners of London haven't been explored since Sherlock Holmes. And I wanted to ask you, is that how it feels when you're down there exploring those sort of almost ghost-like history of London?
It does. I mean, mudlarking, I go down onto the foreshore of the River Thames at low tide, and I go down at all times of the day and night. So sometimes I'm down there at night, and that's really when the ghosts start to come out. But it's not a creepy feeling. It's a really comforting feeling, because there are all these lives that have been lived along the river, you know, for thousands of years, that are, you know, the ordinary people who were living and working along the river, and they really keep you company. And just the perspective of the city from down there is a completely different perspective, and you're seeing the city from a totally different place and a different time as well. You know, it's almost timeless down there, because you know you can't see the big buildings and you can't see it, and it's the same as it has been for hundreds of years. So yes, it is it's a really unique place in central London. But you have to remember that the tidal Thames, I searched the tidal Thames, and it starts in Teddington and it goes out to the estuary. So it's not just that little wiggle through central London, it goes out to the windy, wild, windswept kind of estuary as well, which is a completely different beast.
And you've used it really as almost a therapy over the years, haven't you, to get away from the chaos of London and life and things in general?
I have. It's been a great place for me to go. I mean, I don't live in London anymore, but when I did live in London, it was where I went to get away from life, to get away from you know, jobs I hated, terrible relationships, you know, you name it. Then the twins came along. I could get away from the babies. You know, it's always been somewhere that I've gone to just to get away from everything. And I began very much. I mean, I grew up on a farm, so I was used to spending a lot of time on my own, and I enjoy my own company. But I really wanted to get to the city, and you know, after university, I moved to London. But I was looking for somewhere quiet to go, and I tried the parks and all the usual places people go to, but they just seemed there were too many people there. They were too manicured. And then one day I found myself down by the river, and back in the 90s, you know, the river wasn't somewhere that tourists went. It was much quieter. We didn't have the London Eye, and the Bankside wasn't developed, and you could walk for miles along paths and not really see anyone. And then one day I found myself at the top of these this set of wooden river stairs, looking down onto the foreshore, and I realised that I could actually go down onto the foreshore as well, because until then, like a lot of people who live in London, I hadn't really considered going down. It was kind of out of bounds. It was somewhere you weren't allowed to go, or perhaps it was dangerous. And I went down there, and that's when I found really the key to this whole new world, and it was a tiny piece of pipe stem. That you can find absolutely everywhere on the foreshore, but I knew what it was, and it made sense then that there was more to find. So I went back, and every time I went back I found something different, and that's when my mudlarking journey began.
And you still get excited?
I do.
Even though you found lots of things already, you're still excited about what might be found?
I do, because you never know what you're going to find next. You know, it's a huge... I don't like using the word treasure, simply because you know, that implies that there's objects of worth down there, and it's not a monetary thing. It's a I suppose it's more of a spiritual thing. It's more of they're historic treasures. They are fairly worthless objects that tell priceless stories. And you never know what you're going to find next. Every tide will deposit something different. I don't use a metal detector. I don't dig or scrape. So everything, I wait for the river to leave objects for me. So
it's offering them to you.
it's almost offering.
Yeah.
Some days I'll go down and find absolutely nothing. I went last week and found very, very little. But some days I'll find the most incredible objects that have never been recorded before. So it's that sort of, it's almost like a lucky dip, I suppose. It's that excitement you get before you stick your hand in the brand tub and pull something out.
And you truly become a time traveller, don't you? Because these objects are from every century. You've found a huge expanse, thousands of years old.
Yeah. I mean, the objects that I found go back thousands of years, and that knowledge that when you bend down, you see it, you bend down, the moment you touch it, you're almost breaking the magic, I suppose, because you're the first person in all those years to touch it, since it was lost or dropped by its original owner. And that feeling of reaching back through time to touch history is just magical and absolutely unique.
And you've had some help, presumably, because what's gorgeous about the book is you are transported back in history, all the lovely stories that are woven into who might have owned it, what it actually is. You've had some help with that research in terms of, I know that the Museum of London, for example, have helped you with identification and things like that. How does that work?
Well, you need to have a permit to go mudlarking, and as part of your permit, the rules of your permit, anything over 300 years old and of historic interest, you have to report to the Portable Antiquity Scheme. And this is a project that's run by the British Museum, and they are trying to record all the objects that are found in fields and beaches and rivers in the country, in England and Wales, and to keep a record of them, because so many more people are metal detecting, things are being found, and they want to keep a record of these sort of homeless objects, really. And so I report anything unusual to the Portable Antiquity Scheme, and if I find something and I don't know what it is, they are invaluable for helping me find out what it is. I've got a whole library of weird books that help me out. The internet's fantastic, but just sometimes I get really stumped. And the database is brilliant, and my finds liaison officer is fantastic, and he has access to a whole slew of professionals as well that he can ask. And the finds liaison officer in London works from the Museum of London, and a lot of the objects in the Museum of London were actually found in the river. So if I don't know what it is, usually they can help me out, find out what they are.
It's good to have a friend
It
who
is.
knows.
Yes.
Now, when I was reading the book, one of the things that really stood out for me was really the relationship of rivers and the spirituality of rivers. I've spent a lot of time in India, and I've spent a lot of time on the banks of the Ganga. And there I was reading away thinking, gosh, this sounds so similar, the history, the whole of life happened on that river, and I hadn't really appreciated that about London and the Thames. And there I am thinking of the Ganga, and then all of a sudden you mention it. So there is that whole spiritual connection for the river, isn't there?
Very much, yes. I mean, the river has always been a sacred river. It's ever since the very first hunter-gatherers pitched their camps on its banks and started fishing in it. It was a sacred place for them. They made offerings to it. Mudlarks have found bent Bronze Age swords and the most incredible things. The Waterloo helmet, the Battersea shield. They were all offerings made to. And even the Romans were making offerings. The very first bridge was a Roman bridge, and they think that there might have been a shrine partway across because of the sheer number of Roman coins that have been found in the river. Maybe they were flicking a coin as they went across. Even today, people are still flicking money. I find so much modern money in the river as well, and also today the Hindu community treat the river or use the river as a sacred river in much the same way as they use the Ganges. So you find a lot of Indian offerings, the little deer lamps and the statues and photographs and beads and loads of coconuts. But it's not just the Hindus. I've found West African offerings, voodoo offerings, Wiccan offerings. So there are loads of different faiths and beliefs still using the river as this sacred place, and it does feel sacred. It does feel like a very sacred place.
Especially when you're right down on that,
when you're right
on
with
the
it.
edge.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
And one of the other interesting things I loved in the book is just the distinction between, you mentioned modern money, and you, I think, said that's not going to last like these things are going to last.
No. I mean, I've found coins that are 2,000 years old, and they could have been lost yesterday. Our money today has got a steel core, and so once the outside has gone and it starts to blister and rust, it will just dissolve eventually. So even our legacy is appalling. I mean, as a generation, we are leaving behind money that is just going to fall apart, and plastic, just loads and loads of plastic. That's our legacy, I'm afraid. And what I'm finding is rubbish, is historic rubbish. It's just that our ancestors' rubbish was so much nicer than ours.
One of which we have talked about off camera, the Pilgrim Badge, which I'm fascinated by, because it's something I know you've wanted to find and you found bits of.
It is, yes. I mean, this goes back again to the idea of the river as a sacred place. The old medieval bridge has a shrine dedicated to Thomas Becket. A lot of the pilgrims would set off from the bridge, especially if they were coming down to Canterbury to Becket's shrine, and people set off from London to all parts of the world. They even went to Jerusalem. It could take years to get to Jerusalem. When they got there to these various shrines, they would buy a bit like we might buy a fridge magnet if we go to Howlett's or London Zoo or something like that. They'd buy a pilgrim badge just to stick on their cloaks or their hats, just to show people that they're good Christians, show people where they'd been, and to bring a little bit of the magic back from the shrine. So you get these beautiful little pewter pilgrim badges with it's usually got the saint on it, and I've been looking for one now for over 15 years, and I've ever found are little bits of ones which are very treasured, but I've just wanted a complete one. And then I was on the foreshore about 2 weeks ago, and I found my first Pilgrim Badge, and I was so excited. I picked it up and I instantly assumed it was a Becket badge, because they're the most common, but it's actually not. It's an Osmond from Salisbury, and it dates from about 1450. And it's a lot rarer than a Becket badge, and they think that it could have been made in exactly the same mould as the identical badge they have in Salisbury Museum. So it's a very important badge.
Very fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, really gorgeous find. Now, you just said, you've been doing this over 15 years. Now, that's a long time before this book. So how did you start to sort of document your finds and start researching? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I was going down there mainly for sort of my mental health for the longest time, and then I was at home with the twins, and the twins were were too small to talk back to me, and I was feeling a little bit cut off, and I was getting out down to the river, once a week from my own space, and researching the objects that I found during nap time, and doing all of that. And I thought, it's such a shame I can't share this sort of thing with other people, because there's so much I'm finding. It's so interesting. There must be other people who are interested in it. And so I started a Facebook page, and that was in 2012 as London Mudlark. And it was the first time anyone had posted anything on social media. There was one lady who's a friend of mine now, who had been writing an excellent blog that I'd been following. And I thought, well, surely I can put it on Facebook. So I put it on Facebook, and it grew from there. I never expected it to grow. It really was just for me to just type all these things up somewhere to keep all my information. And it grew and grew and grew. And loads of people post their stuff online now, so I've inspired a load of other people to do it. I did it anonymously for the longest time. As I say, I started in 2012 until 2016. I was London Mudlark, so nobody knew who I was, and I didn't want people to know who I was, because that wasn't why I was doing it. I was just genuinely enjoying sharing it. And then I was contacted by my agent through my Facebook page, who asked if I would write a book. And I work in publishing. I'm an editor, and so I know what goes into writing a book. I know the blood, sweat and tears that goes into, and I'd never wanted to write one myself. I wasn't a frustrated author. I'd had no ambition to write a book. And I very nearly deleted her message, but I did agree to go and see her. And by the time, she's very, very lovely and persuasive. By the time I'd left her office, I'd agreed to write up a proposal.
She's good.
She's very good. I'd agreed to write up a proposal, and I'd signed with the agency, and she sent it off to, I think it was 11 different publishers, and we got all but 3 of them came back with an offer. And so it took off from there, and of course then I had to come out of hiding and admit who I was, which was interesting in itself, because I think most people just assumed I was a man.
How funny.
Yeah, people were very specific about who they thought I was, a man with a beard, and I disappointed a few ladies. So,
But all of that turned into this Sunday Times bestseller that I've got sitting right here.
it did, yes.
And beautiful pictures inside. I mean, that must have been an important thing for you as well. I mean, obviously the writing and all the stories and the research, beautiful, but to have actual pictures of the objects as well.
Yes, I mean, it's got these beautiful illustrations on the inside cover, and they're drawn by my friend Johnny, who's a mudlark. And Johnny is a bit of an enigma. I met him on the foreshore. He doesn't have a mobile phone or a computer. He's really hard to get hold of, and so I was relying on bumping into him down on the foreshore if he happened to be there, and I happened to be there on the right day. And somehow we managed to contact each other enough for him to agree for me to use his illustrations, because one of the first times I met him, he pulled out this little tiny pocketbook, and he draws these exquisite miniatures of the objects that he finds on the foreshore. I think he even incorporates mud into it to make it look, and they're stunning. And it's his very personal diary, so I was so lucky that he let me use them.
Fantastic, and very personal as well. It's not just a photograph.
Yes, very personal. Yeah, although there are photographs in the paperback now, in the middle, which are of some of my favourite finds.
And this is like the question beyond question, really, and a really naughty question. If you had to say which find is your favourite, what would it be?
Well, everybody asks me that, so I don't mind answering it, and it's a tricky one, because now I've found the Pilgrim Badge. Is it the Pilgrim Badge? But no, it's not. It's still my Tudor child shoe, just because it's so personal. It's little. I mean, it would have fitted my son when he was about 5, I think. And although people, I think, were smaller back then, it's definitely a child shoe. And it's a very, very simple. It looks very much like the shoes that you might buy in Morocco. And it's still got the creases across the front, and the toes worn a little hole through. And if you look inside, you can see where the heel and the little toes were pressed down. And it just offers up so many stories. How was it lost? Who did it belong to? How was it lost? Was someone being bullied? Did they pull it off and throw it in the river for a laugh? Was he trying to run across, he or she was trying to run across the mud and lost a shoe? We'll never know. Getting into a boat, it fell off. We'll never know. But it's just this object that belonged to someone who has been completely forgotten by history. And those are the sort of objects, to me, that are treasure.
And they are special. And they're all in here.
They are.
Yes. And I can't recommend the book highly enough. We are delighted that we've got a lovely event with Lara that we've had to postpone this year for obvious reasons. So on the 21st of March next year, 2021, we will have a very exclusive event with Lara. Now, tickets were already sold, but you can write in to us to see if anyone wants to, I would say, give up their ticket. I think the only reason anyone would give up their ticket is if they can't make that new date. But do write in to us if you're interested in coming, because not only will we talk to Lara much more in depth about the objects, but she'll have lots of them on display. And it's a very exclusive event which includes a lovely signed copy of the book and, ladies and gentlemen, a little find to take home with you from the River Thames, which is very exciting. So thank you very much. It's been so lovely just to catch up with you.
It has. Yeah.
Now, we always do a little giveaway, which you and I hadn't really talked about, but I'm going to offer a signed copy of this fantastic paperback book. Lara won't mind signing it, I know you won't. No, so you can write in to BroadstairsLit@gmail.com, and the question that I'd like you to answer, it'll be the first person to write in to us that gets the book. I'd like you to tell us the description, and it's used on the book, so it'll be easy for you to find if you Google. What is the description of mudlarking that is used on the book? That's our question.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, let's see what comes back.
Oh, I was trying to work out what it is myself.
Luckily, I'll be judging it, so it'll be fine. Thank you so much, Lara, and truly phenomenal book, deserved of all the praise that it's had. And I'm just looking forward to something new, which I presume there's something coming.
Well, you never know. I've got a lot in the pipeline, so watch this space.
We will indeed. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for watching.